Today, I wanted to talk about how to stop self-sabotage, and it's something that I'm very familiar with. I definitely had this tendency when I was younger. I would say teenage years all the way up to maybe even my late 20s. So I have been through various patterns of self-sabotage, and I wanted to talk with you today to kind of demystify why we do the things we do, even though we know it's not good for us, and how do we get ahead of it? How do we outgrow it? Because a lot of times the things that we do to ourselves, the choices we make for ourselves can be the hardest to sort of live with because we had a hand in it. And if we keep revisiting or reliving the same patterns, it can become quite painful over time because there is this distance or gap between where you are right now and where you want to be or how you want to feel. So let's dive right in. I noticed one of my own self-sabotaging fears started popping up as I was working on truly completing this project that I am so passionate about, the Treehouse Collective. I've talked about it in just a couple of videos. Basically, this is a new thing for me. It's a new endeavor, starting a community, being able to actually engage with people on a more personal, connected level is something that I've not done yet. So far, I have done these videos, which I know some people find helpful, but I just can't feel completely satisfied because I am talking to such a general audience that I don't really know who I'm talking to and if what I'm saying is actually indeed tailored and unique and helpful for you. But as I'm approaching this creation and the completion of this project with the waitlist growing, a part of me became paralyzed. This fear part of me that just wanted to shut down. I wanted to walk away from the project. I did not want to continue. I just essentially felt like a deer caught in headlights. I know how to move forward. I know what I need to do, but it was like there was an unwillingness within me. And if you're familiar, there's a lot of different ways to describe this phenomenon. You can think of the upper limit, which is the threshold in which we feel comfortable. And anything beyond that threshold typically leads us to have fears, doubts, and worst case scenario, we just feel paralyzed and we give up altogether because it is just on the outer range of what we're comfortable with. You can think of it emotionally as the window of tolerance. It's usually typically shown as sort of a graph with a top and a bottom. And our window of tolerance shows that how much we're able to tolerate within a given circumstance. And if we were to encounter a situation where we go above that tolerance window, we would typically fight, flight, or shut down. So those are great ways to think about it. Whenever you feel like you've come upon something that is beneficial for your growth, for your change, for healing, it typically will feel a little bit like friction because there is friction within us. Carl Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." So if you are at the start of your journey on overcoming your own patterns that are not beneficial for you, wanting to outgrow them, first we have to do is to recognize our patterns that are currently existing. And if you can get really honest with yourself, they're not too incredibly hard to pinpoint. But one of my patterns is jumping into relationships very fast and staying in them longer than probably good for either person. And pretty much immediately, just a few months after the breakup, I would typically get into another long-term relationship. And this is a pattern I've had since I was 15 years old. So that's about half of my life. And every time this pattern would occur and another relationship would fail, I would reflect on it. And the thing that just kept coming through to me is this one sentence: you have to come home to yourself. And this idea of home is a wound for me, I think. I never felt like I really belonged in any one country, having immigrated at a really young age, having most of my family, 99% of them, in another country far away that I really got to see, moving around a lot by choice or by circumstance that was out of my control. So therein emerged a pattern of me seeking for the sense of safety and security within a romantic partnership. And because there's such emphasis and such heaviness writing on this, as you can imagine, I inadvertently, unintentionally sabotaged some of them or gotten into the wrong ones without even much deliberation when I should have been thinking or weeding out the red flags, so to speak. So this is a pattern of mine that I've recognized, and it's taken many cycles and years to actually really confront it and hopefully do something to truly change it. I think something else to acknowledge here is once we've identified our primary patterns in our life that we don't like, let's just call them impreferential or unpreferential. We don't want these. We feel and we've seen that there is evidence in the past that this pattern does not serve us or others around us. Once we've identified these patterns, what do we do from there? I used to struggle with this idea of being authentically myself, owning that, being confident in that, feeling self-assured in that, versus always this ever-present deep desire of outgrowing myself, versions of myself, and kind of continuing to evolve. And in the process, I've come to accept and understand that each version of me that I get to meet, so the version today and all the versions that will be, those are all me. They're all authentically me. Okay, I was editing this video when I realized what I was really trying to say here is that while it's important for us to have self-concepts and have identities that we attach ourselves to or claim, sometimes they actually get in our way. Meaning, for example, if for the longest time you're like, oh, I'm a sad girl, right? That's your persona, sad girl. And it feels impossible to even tap into joyful optimism, possibility. So think of whatever identities you've been attached to or attached yourself to and assigned. You can even think about what types of memes you and your friends send to each other. A lot of these things are past versions of us that we haven't really examined lately, and those things can actually hold us back and keep us in those same patterns while we repeat what we don't want. And because they're so familiar to us, we don't even realize that they're roadblocks, that they're getting in our path. So I think that's something I want all of us to consider is what things from the past have you claimed and held on to and has not challenged in a long time? Are you still those people? Are you still those versions of you that you're holding on to because it's familiar, because you laugh about it, you send memes about it? So I wanted to just highlight that as I was editing. Okay, back to regular programming. Even just knowing that it's self-sabotage, it already hands a significant amount of power back into your hands. Sometimes it feels really frustrating when we get in our own way despite our conscious efforts, but it is still something that remains in our hands. We just have to work around ourselves, so to speak. And here's what I mean. Before you can outgrow your patterns, you first have to recognize them. So the awareness part I spoke about. Also, we have to accept them. And furthermore, even befriend them. Imagine these parts of you that are attracting certain patterns or acting out certain patterns of behavior or thought or feeling are stubborn children. And sometimes, depending on the personality of the child, the more you push them, the more they push back. And it is because all they are wanting to do is to grab your attention and be heard and seen. These mechanisms that are within us, they are acting as protectors. But imagine a well-intended mother, okay? She's trying to protect her children from being rejected out in the world, from falling down, from getting hurt, from failures. She inadvertently sort of traps her children in this place where there is a lack of freedom or choice. She is trying to tell her children what is good for them and what is not, and going as far as forbidding them to doing certain things or setting really strict parameters. Now, from the mother's perspective or our part's perspective, she is doing this out of love. So in the same way, what our parts or these mechanisms that are doing within us is trying to protect us, because we're biologically wired to seek for safety, and safety means what's familiar, and familiar is not always good for us. These mechanisms within us are going to be unconsciously putting ourselves in situations, thinking certain thoughts, and taking actions to continue to stay in what's familiar and attract what is familiar. But these systems are not intellectual, and they're within the problem of why you feel this dissonance of what you consciously want, what you intellectually want, versus what you end up doing. Another thing I want you to consider is that a lot of times we refer to these defense mechanisms as maladaptive or maladapted. But the reality is, at some point, they were well adapted. These mechanisms are protective and they got you through a period of time when your window of tolerance could not withhold what you were going through. Whatever it is that you were going through, it acted and became activated when you encountered an incredible challenge that you were not able to handle. And those mechanisms did protect you at that time. Maybe you needed to be disassociated from what was happening. They're only now maladaptive because you've outgrown the need for them. You've become an adult. You are able to challenge yourself and put yourself in situations that continues to foster your growth. And now these mechanisms that once did help you are now getting in your way. But it's important to recognize this so we're able to have compassion for those parts of us because they got us here. They helped us survive. But in order to thrive, some of them do have to be rewritten, so to speak. Throughout my own personal experiences, I can tell you that I've wasted so much time fighting myself. And to an extent, I still have these inner conflicts even today. And what I've realized though is that the shaming or feeling embarrassed, guilt tripping, angry, getting angry at yourself for choosing the wrong things time and time again has not helped me make significant progress. And I think the reason why is, again, back to point before when I was saying our nervous system or we're biologically seeking to feel a sense of safety. And even if the threat is not coming from an external circumstance, but coming from our own internal dialogue, I believe it affects us the same way. So we might shut down, or we might have this so-called negative self-talk. You'll never be able to do it. You'll always make the same mistakes. It's just not for you. This is not who you are. This is not meant for you. That kind of a narrative that goes on, and it continues to further shut down our openness and curiosity and the desire to step outside of our comfort zone. It's hard to step outside of our comfort zone, as you might have known. Again, we're all seeking, all of us unconsciously are seeking for a sense of familiarity and safety. So how do we get out of our comfort zone and thus being able to get out of our self-sabotaging patterns, behaviors, and feelings? After applying this system of witnessing your pattern, becoming aware, accepting them, even befriending them, whatever it is, and you have to sit down and figure that out for yourself, whatever it is that you sense you need to do, especially if there's a big leap or gap between who you are, where you are now, and where you want to be, you have to take steps that are small enough that it doesn't feel intrusive, especially if this is a very sensitive thing. Imagine a busy working mother who hasn't prioritized her health. She goes to the doctor's office and they tell her, your health is in decline. If you want to be there for your children, you have to start exercising 5 times a week. And because this mother is already burdened with everything she has to do for her children, to provide for them, and all the tasks she has all day long, this task of needing to become a completely different person and exercising 5 days out of the week feels too much, and she shuts down and she becomes hopeless. But if instead the physician or doctor had said, I want you to see if you can just go outside and take a walk for 5 minutes a day this week and see how that feels. She then becomes empowered as she is able to do this experience. She's able to take herself on a walk just for 5 minutes each day, and it boosts her confidence of getting or being able to get closer to that version of a person who is able to be active more or exercise more. Even if it's not 5 times a week, she starts to shift her idea of who she could be. And thus being able to prioritize, maybe it's more playtime with her children outside. Maybe it's just doing a 10-15 minute yoga video in the morning. When we are not piling a massive request or demand of change, and we break these things down into 1 to 3% increments, let's say over a week, our system is much better to tolerate that change, and it continues to build reassurance and confidence in our ability to keep going and to keep changing. Sadly, a lot of these patterns that we've inherited were not out of choice. There could be generational patterns. There could be patterns that stemmed from childhood when we had not much choice, nor were we able to process what was going on at the time. And hence, these mechanisms became pathologized in a way. And there's something that I've had to make peace with and accept and had an incredibly difficult time. And that is this idea of a savior, something or someone or some event outside of me that is going to fill that abyss of a hole or wound that I received from my childhood. The train that carries that unconditional love that every child should have gotten from their parents, that train has left the station. And the most empowering thing we can do now is to actualize and realize that the power remains in our hands, or is in our hands as adults. If we find the origin of our self-sabotaging patterns and we stay there, then we just continue to remain a victim in that place. And you're going to be able to find reasons and excuses and evidence that continues to reaffirm of the way that you are and why you will remain this way, even if it's painful for you. So in order to stop some of these patterns that are undesirable or self-sabotaging behaviors, we have to somehow become people that are comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because remember, familiarity is comfortable. It's safe. It genetically or biologically feels safe to our unconscious. So in order to allow our conscious mind, what we say we want, what we think we want, to come out on top, so to speak, we have to become the kind of person that is okay for what's unfamiliar, that feels excited and curious for things that we've not experienced, and to continue to seek out experiences that may either be the opposite or a better adjusted version of the pattern we're used to. And it's going to feel uncomfortable, and it's going to feel unfamiliar, and it's going to feel scary. Taking it one step further, in smaller ways at first, see if you can become someone that enjoys this process. For example, when I decided to go solo travel after graduating from college, on my journey as an introvert, as someone that used to be a really shy child, I encountered so many uncomfortable moments, getting lost, not being able to communicate in the language, having to talk to strangers who didn't speak my language, looking like a fool in public because I didn't know how the system in the mall food court worked. All these experiences that were initially so uncomfortable, each one as I encountered them and lived through them, made me feel more and more empowered to be able to encounter challenges and uncomfortable situations. And in a strange way, the more you do this, the more you start to develop an appetite for it. You start to want to challenge yourself in these uncomfortable things. For example, I am incredibly afraid of heights. Even if I'm not anywhere near the edge of the cliff, I start to feel nauseated and just dizzy. So for this reason, and because of all my previous experiences, I kind of go out of my way to try things that challenges that fear. So I'll try climbing, I'll hike up a hill, even though it takes me twice as long to get back down. All these experiences, once completed, even if they're small experiences, helps create an extra layer of empowerment that I feel. So the next time you are sort of feeling stuck or trapped by your own patterns, and you want to get curious and you want to have an inner dialogue with those parts of you that might be sabotaging your path forward, I'll give you an example of what happened to me recently. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I started to feel kind of paralyzed about moving forward with this community that I've been passionately wanting to create for years now, because it's something new, it's outside of my comfort zone, and it's reached my upper limit of doing things I know how to do. I knew there was a part of me that wanted to sabotage me moving forward with this. So what I did was, I was actually driving at the time. Maybe don't do this when you're driving, but I took some deep breaths and I centered myself, and I asked this part of me that was activated, and essentially, I sought out first where it was in my body, because a lot of times we overutilize our minds to figure things out, but it just tends to dilute the situation more. So I found where the part was in my body, and I felt it. It was in my throat or neck area, this fearful part. And I just sensed into what it was feeling. And then I asked, what is causing this fear and this doubt and creating a sense of paralysis within me of not wanting to keep forward on this project? And I just listened. As I listened and waited, this part told me that I am trying to protect you. If you rolled out this community and either no one signed up or you just did a horrible job and everyone hated it, this would reaffirm your belief that you are not on the right path, that what you feel is to be your purpose and joy and wanting to connect with people and in a way help them, if that's possible, would be shattered. And it told me that I would be devastated. And in order to protect me, it was better that I stayed where I was to continue just making content, because I knew how to do that. I knew that people were commenting on them saying they were helpful. That could be enough. And so I listened to this part and I felt into this part, but I also called up myself with a capital S, if you want to call it, or this higher self. And I said, thank you so much for wanting to protect me. I am so appreciative of what you're trying to do. But would it be possible by chance that you trust me this time, that you allow me to move forward, to continue creating this thing I wanted to do for so long? And I'll willingly do it and sit through it with the fears right alongside, taking each step, even though my heart's pounding, I'm unsure, I have doubts. Would you give me the opportunity to take that chance for me to show you that it's not as scary as you might think? And even though I appreciate you trying to protect me, I can do this. Let me step in and take charge. And I could instantly feel that part of me relax and sort of leaning into this other version of me that I've called up, the more adult version of me, if you want to think it that way. And she agreed to loosen the reins of this nervousness of moving forward, to allow me to show her that even if we fail, even if it's scary, we can do this. We have to do this. This is something we wanted to do for forever. And you can try this practice on your own. If you're curious, this is inspired by, or this came from the internal family system. I kind of put my own twists and turns on it a little bit. I find there's a lot of familiarity or similarity actually with inner child healing and IFS. But if you want to dig deeper and do your own research, feel free to do so. This can be a practice for you to come compassionately to those parts of you that might be the roadblocks from you getting to where you want to go, or from you choosing a different outcome, a different reaction, a different pattern. So this company, Magic Mind, sent me a pack of these to try, and these are mental performance elixirs. It's a perfect afternoon little pick-me-up, so if you're interested, I'll link this down below. And the final point I want to impart on you before I shut this whole operation down so I can like turn the fan on higher is this. As human beings, we have the tendency to hyperfixate on the negatives. So if someone complimented you with 10 compliments and 1 criticism, most likely you'll remember the criticism. It's a tendency that every person has. If you don't have it, you're an outlier. Additionally, we also tend to hold on to feelings of sadness or failure or negative emotions more than joyful moments. This is why happiness feels fleeting. And so what I want you to do as the final part of all of this is to celebrate your wins. You are further along than you think, especially if you've been on this journey for a while. And this is, again, something that I've really had to recognize. The person that I am today has grown vastly, even from the version of me a year ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago. But sometimes because you're experiencing yourself in real time and you're coming up on these patterns that feels like a repeat, you feel like you haven't done anything. You feel like you've not made any progress. But I assure you this is not true. It just feels that way. And it's incredibly important to continue to reaffirm of the changes, however small, that we have made, to create more confidence within us to keep moving in the direction that we want to be and to keep lessening the gap between where we are and where we want to go. And so next time you have a joyful moment that you encounter, I want you to intentionally linger on it longer than you normally would. Really savor in the sensations of everything that's going on. And the next time you make a choice that is different from the ones you've made previously, even if it's something slight, let's say instead of manically checking on someone's Instagram that you just met, you called a friend. I want you to take note of that and congratulate yourself from choosing something different than the pattern that you're trying to get rid of or to change from. If you like today's video and you are interested in my baby, the Treehouse Collective, I will link it down below with all the information. By the time this video goes live, the community should be live as well. If not, I'll probably come back during the edit. Thank you so much for being here today, and I hope this off-the-cuff video was okay. If you have any questions or if you have any suggestions, I'm always open to hearing them, and you can leave a comment down below. Thank you so much, and until next time.